Hi folks, my name is David. I'm the minister here at Erskine Parish Church. It's great to have you connecting with us, and I'm so glad you found our online resources. If you were to come into our physical church, you would get one of these welcome packs, so consider this your digital welcome. However you've joined us, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe to our platform. That allows you to continue to see when we're putting up new content. And also, if you'd like to get in touch and actually connect with us, you can email at epcnotices@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. There's a powerful diary entry that we have from the Blitz in World War II, where in the winter bombing campaign of 1940, the city was ablaze. And there's this one entry where a gentleman walks out and he sees that the city is lit up in conflagration, and he sees that St. Paul's Cathedral is still standing. And he wrote in his diary very simply, "Maybe God still sees us." And this psalm is about what we do with our sense of where God is when we're surrounded by difficulty and trouble, both out with us and within us. It's a live question. It's one that people often ask, particularly when faced with the atrocities of war. Where is God in the midst of all of that? And the answer to that is something that's been precious to people who have faith through the centuries, indeed through the millennia, because it's all the way back here in the Psalms. The answer to it is at the beginning and end of the psalm. There's a lovely bookend, because in verse 1 we read, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble." And the psalmist goes through, if you like, up and down on the waves, and he begins to experience the tumult and the difficulty of wondering where God is, and he ends with, "The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress." And do you know what I think we're meant to do with that? Is wrestle with that question of where is God in the midst of our difficulties and trouble, in the suffering, the evil, the violence, the horror of war in our world. We're meant to ask, where is God? And it's in that process of asking it and engaging with God that we find resources for our own soul. And so I want to look at three of the resources that are in this psalm. Three, if you like, poetic pictures that God gives us of where he is with us in the midst of our difficulties. The first one is fairly obviously God, our refuge. Then in verse 4, there's a picture of a river, and I want to look at what that tells us about God being with us. And then lastly, the most famous verse in this psalm is probably verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." Now, it's sometimes not completely put in its context, but I want to look at the fact that God is taking history to a place of eventual rest from violence and from evil. So let's look at the refuge, the river, and the rest as we find them in the psalm. Verse 1, "God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in trouble." The ancient world, they often had cities of refuge, and there's instructions for them in the Old Testament. And the idea was that that city would be a permanent fixture, somewhere that you could run when you had perhaps been accused of a crime that you didn't commit, or you were even a fugitive for some reason. You could go to those cities of refuge and you would be safe. People who were involved in ancient warfare also would quite often create enclaves within the hills, and that would be a safe refuge where they would be able to go. Why? The idea is the permanence. A refuge is something that does not change. It cannot be altered by momentary circumstances from day to day or even year to year. Now, this opening verse is supposed to lift people up, their eyes well beyond the hills, to the eternal grandeur of God. You see, because quite often when we're faced with difficulties and troubles, we are consumed with the human level of those problems. And by focusing on the kind of horizontal and the human level of those problems, then we don't seem to find much help or strength. But one of our first resources that we have in Christianity and as people of faith is a God who has revealed to us some of his attributes, his characteristics that are meant to give us comfort. And so here the psalmist is looking and seeing God as a refuge, an immovable force that is changeless, that isn't subject to the whims of whatever's going on in our world. And so they're encouraged to take a sense of safety in God's unchanging nature. And our strength, I enjoyed looking into this week, because God is obviously, we would say, one of his characteristics is being powerful and being strong. But you know, the actual grammar of this verse is saying God is our strength. He is my strength. He is your strength. It's a bit different. God provides strength within you and within me for troubled and difficult times. So yes, we can passively go, of course God is powerful and strong, but God makes you and me strong. God increases and fortifies the strength that is within us for difficulty. If you like, God creates resilience within us, an ever-present help in trouble. There are many pictures that you can go to of a God that is somewhat distant and somewhat unapproachable. And it's never a picture that you get of God in the Bible. I love that verse when Jesus says in the Gospels, you have not because you ask not. The force of this opening gambit in the psalm is to be able to say to people, these are the attributes of God. This is the grandeur and the greatness of the God you are worshipping. But you know what? That's not something to be gazed at in a museum kind of setup. That's something that is available to you from moment to moment, an ever-present help in trouble. So, there's the attributes of God. He is immovable and unchangeable. He is powerful. He creates strength within us, and he is not far from any one of us to be able to call on from moment to moment. So, what happens when that meets the challenges of life and the difficulties of the world? Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea and the waters roar and foam. Now, in the ancient world, these are taking some of the most vivid images that they know for describing the realities of life. The mountains were places not only of refuge, but also places of permanence. They weren't going anywhere. And the mountains represent things in life that we can depend on, that we bank on. They are not God, they're part of our creation, but we think they're fixed and they're firm and they're sure. And we trust in them. Trust that the mountains. You and I trust that Mount Everest will be there tomorrow when we wake up and if we were to check if it was there. They don't move very quickly or easily. The sea was a harbinger of terror, of death, of chaos in the ancient world. And indeed, in lots of cultures still today, the culture I come from in Lewis, we have a complicated relationship with the sea because it has provided livelihood for many years, boys going off fishing, also in the Merchant and the Royal Navy, but also brought a lot of death to our shores. And when it talks about the waters foaming and roaring, it's saying that that's meant to be a sound of terror, of trouble coming, of something being overwhelming and taking us over. It put in my mind, there's a lovely, it's a poem that got made into a song in Gaelic called Natar Hard, which is all about, it's a whole poem about the sound of the sea and how it can be both terrifying and comforting. And it says, Natar Hard, Cloyn Fuam, and Natar Fuam Gun Vahar Gun Truas. The sea, the never-changing sea, the rolling and crashing of the sea, relentless and without mercy. That's bringing out something of what they're looking out. And that's a poetic way of describing anything in life that feels like it's going to sink us and take us under, that we're not sure how we're going to be able to deal with it. And this image is so powerful because it takes two things that we know in life. We all know what are our fears and our struggles, the things that we perhaps wonder are maybe going to take us down and take us out, perhaps going to hold our faith below the waterline. We also know the things that give us stability and comfort and trust, the stuff that we put our hope in. And that's different for all of us. For some of us, it might be savings that we have, or it might be our job or our identity, or it might be our connection, our family, our relationships. That can be anything. But it's whatever you think is more or less semi-permanent, and that gives you hope from day to day and week to week. And this is imagining a situation where you know all of that stability going down into the waves and being brought in and under your worst fears, being taken out. What is that for you and me? That is what we faced whenever we've had world wars. The things that we took for granted, the political stability, if you like, the rules-based world order, and that's been tested in many different parts of the world just now. That's been tested even in our political culture. You and I live in a world of uncertainty. You and I live in a church of uncertainty. In the Kirk and in the national church, things that we thought were stable and that were givens from the 1950s and before that are no longer there. We're in a time of unprecedented challenge, difficulty, and struggle because the culture around us is changing. So what do we do when those mountains, when they're plunged into the sea? What do we do with any of that? God is an ever-present help in trouble. And this is a word for all of us this morning, that this is trying to be, the Psalms are poems, and they're meant to be non-specific. They are written in such a way that you can see your life and your situation in them. Whatever you're feeling like is being shaken, that was stable and that was strong for you and you're not sure of, whatever you feel like is overwhelming and pulling you under, God is saying that he is interested in being there for you, that you have only to ask, to find him to be an ever-present help in trouble. Jesus encourages us in the Gospels to come to him when we are feeling weary and burdened by the cares and the struggles of life, because it is his desire to help us through them. I was telling the children a little bit of the story of the HMT Lancastria, which was a sequestered ship in the Second World War in the coast of Saint Nazaire in the western coast of France. There was a bombardment similar to Dunkirk, and the German planes were circling and they were starting to bomb the coast relentlessly. And this ship was brought in to be able to try and get people to safety. And it's actually the worst maritime disaster in British wartime history. There's a monument to it over at the Golden Jubilee Hospital, not far from us. And some 4,000 lives, souls were lost. But some managed to escape the wreckage as it was going down. And all they were able to do was find pillars and planks and whatever debris they could and to hang on. And bravely, and we don't hear about this because it's not as glamorous a story as Dunkirk, but amazingly, lots of patrol vessels and even little commercial vessels went out, and the whole sea was aflame because of the oil and the spillage. And they went out and into that, through that, and they weren't able to see, and the people in the who escaped the wreckage weren't able to see. But what they kept shouting was, "Hold on, we're coming for you." And so the people in the sea had one arm outstretched, and many of them were pulled onto whatever vessels they could find through that. Whatever we're going through, however much we feel as though our vision is blurred and it's fogged up and we can't see, God has promised to be an ever-present help in trouble. And if we will put our hand out and allow ourselves to exercise some faith and trust in him, it is his promise to take us through it. Whatever it is, God is our refuge. He's your refuge and my refuge and our strength. And then the picture changes a little from verse 3 to 4. Verse 4, there is a river. That was our refuge. Now we're looking at the river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. I love what the psalmist does, because he goes from the idea of the water being a chaotic and terrifying and an uncontrolled sea to this river that runs through a city. It's got borders and boundaries and is controlled. And importantly, as the sea was an untrammeled agent of chaos in the last picture, the water has now been tamed and it's an agent of life. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of the God. It's helping the city around it flourish. Now, the city of God in the Old Testament is always a picture for the people of God gathered. And in ancient Jerusalem, as they built it, there was a little stream, Shiloah, that ran through, and that was a picture of God's presence with them. This is the unique hope and experience of the people of God. This is what makes us who we are, is that we are those gathered around the life-giving presence of God. In a lot of ancient literature and writing, if you read it, the utopia that they one day see is a city that's nicely and perfectly built with a life-giving stream running all the way through it. It's not unique to biblical literature. The ancient Babylonians had a similar idea of that's what the ideal citizenship and society would look like. This stream gives life to everything around it. And this is, in a sense, all that we have and all that we need. There is a cliche, and I'll almost never use it, but I think it's relevant this morning, that you don't know God is all you need until God is all you have. You see, this isn't giving them pictures of lots of external forces that they put their hope and trust in. This is a picture to help people zero down on, we have God in our midst. God is within her. She will not fall, and God will help her at the break of day. Even though nations are in uproar and kingdoms fall, he lifts his voice and the earth melts. This is a piece of the psalm that's about identity, knowing whose we are and who we belong to. And that, if you like, being our secret source of strength that is within us. How lovely a picture is that? Because he's saying that this city isn't in a utopia. This city is not the new heavens and the new earth. And sometimes we have the human tendency to think if we could just have some kind of utopia now, or if their politicians were better, or if these circumstances were different, then we would have the life that we want, and then everything would be sorted. Or sometimes people ask from a skeptical point of view, why doesn't God just come and magic away and sort out all the evil tomorrow? And I don't know. But what I do have in the scripture accords with the reality that I see, but also gives me hope and resources for living within it. Because he's talking about the city existing in a land where nations are raging against one another. But this is what John Calvin called the still, quiet stream within the heart that makes all the difference and gives us power to live within that. God will give you power and peace even amidst the greatest chaos. God will give us, as his people and the church, a sense of his presence that actually changes our perspective and gives us the fortitude to keep moving through whatever it is. Margaret alluded to earlier that we've got a stewardship campaign coming up, and we do, because the church finances are challenging. And yet yesterday we celebrated a day that was filled with not only the Christmas spirit and lots of the nice stuff that comes with that, but a real sense of the church having purpose, of coming together, of being an important part within its community. We get to experience what it is to be a stream of life within a chaotic, often a dark and a difficult world, because we have God within us. In the very midst of you and my heart. Do you know that that's on offer to you this morning? If you are feeling chaos and uncertainty about the future, God offers you and every one of us to know what it is to have him as a peaceful stream running through the middle of our very being, giving us resources, helping us to cope, and indeed giving us hope that however dark, dangerous and difficult the world around us gets, that God is in the midst of us. God is in you and God is in us. And that can never be taken away or changed from us. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. Make glad. We can even know what it is to have enjoyment, to have levity, to have laughter in the midst of gloom and darkness and change around us. And God will help her at the break of day. This is something I sensed as I was reading this week. God will help us in his timing, and it will be just the right timing. So maybe you've been praying and asking God for help, and you've been wanting that sense of peace, and you've been wanting him to do something in your life, but it doesn't seem to be coming. Can I ask you and encourage you to hold on? Because this is about the fact that God sees time so differently to us. And if you're holding on, that he promises that he will come and that he will be with you and that he will answer your prayers. It might not be today or tomorrow, but it will be in his perfect time, and it's something you'll be able to look back and give thanks for. And that's often the experience of people of faith. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God. And finally, the rest that God promises and that offers, and that he offers. He says, verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Be still and know that I am God. So this is in the context of talking about nations that rage, that even attack the people of God in this psalm, and people are feeling under threat. And it's about the unpredictability and the chaos of the world. And asking, well, where is this going? Where is history actually headed? What can we actually hope and believe in? And do you know this be still? It's actually it's a forceful and a direct command. It's saying, stop. Stop being so restless. Stop thrashing around. Stop your ceaseless activity and rumination. Be still and know God. Know his presence, know his promises, know his character and his nature, and know that he will break the bow and shatter the spear, that he will make war cease. And that is our great hope, that there is a day coming where God will come and restore perfect justice. And we don't know how that's going to happen, but we also don't have his vantage point on things. There's a great deal to be said for being still and praying and looking and waiting for God to act. You know, the worst evil that mankind can do, the most despotic dictators, their power is insignificant compared to the power of God. They aren't actually able to finally direct the eventual course of history to where it's going. The picture that came to my head when I was kind of looking at the language behind this week is, do you know when sometimes you've had the experience of a child who's kind of losing their rag a wee bit, and they're flaming their arms, and you realize because of your height differential, if you just hold their head very gently, they're not really able to get many punches to land on you, and you can keep them there. That's what's going on in this picture. That's what God is giving us reassurance of. That is his power, that is his level, and all the raging of the world and the nations, it is as nothing compared to his power. And indeed, compared to his will, where he is going to make all war cease, and where he is going to bring peace to our world, and where we wait on that, and we wait for it hopefully, and we wait on it trustfully. And we never know what is just around the corner and how God is going to break into our world's experience. In World War I, towards the end, the commander of the German forces was General Ludendorff, and he was starting to experience now what we would easily recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, although it wasn't post because he was in the thick of war. But he was starting to break down. He was starting to become mentally unstable and act erratic, and he had his own psychologist who was out on the front lines with him and trying to alleviate his symptoms, and none of it to any effect. And towards the end of September 1918, he went to the Kaiser in Germany, and he declared that Germany was going to be lost, despite the fact that none of the Allied forces had made any encroachment into Germany at this point at all. He said it was all going to be over, and there was no point in continuing to fight, and soon afterwards he had a nervous breakdown. Through news of that travelling through to the front, that completely changed the morale, and within a couple of months, we had what we were celebrating this morning, the armistice and the laying down of all guns. In large part through the instability, through the continuing maddening of one man because of the evil and the horror and the chaos and the senselessness of war. But that was used to then bring the peace that we give so much thanks for. Be still and know that I am God. His power is unimaginably greater than we are able to conceive of. He has promised that he is bringing us towards an eventual peace, and we hope for that. But in the meantime, he is our refuge. He will increase your strength. He is an ever-present help in whatever trouble you face, and he is waiting on you and I to call on him and to find his resources to be real. He is waiting for us to ask him for that peace that runs through us like a calm river amidst whatever chaotic waters that are raging around us. And he asks us to be still and to look for his work and to trust in what he is doing in our world. May God bless his word to us. Amen. Thank you for tuning into our channel here at Erskine Parish Church. We create this and give it away so that it can be a blessing. Everything that we do here in the church relies on the generous backing of those who support us. And so if you would like to become one of them and give something back, then we've made it as easy as possible. You can go to erskine.parish/donate, and there you can give a one-off bank transfer. You can set up a regular standing order or donate by PayPal. You can also download a gift aid form so that if you're a UK taxpayer, it increases the contributions that way as well. Thank you so much for watching, and we pray God's blessing on you.